Yeah, I'm here with John, and let's call him an anonymous source who is well aware of the energy situation and the gas situation in the UK and Europe. And he's going to talk to us about that situation and what can we expect in the future as a result of what he's about to tell us, and how is that going to lead into major changes in the whole entire world and the West. So let's start with John. Go ahead, John.
Well, as my job, being an energy reporter, my job as an energy reporter is there to write commentaries based on the movement of commodities. In my case, I specialize in gas, but I have also had experience in oil, in agricultural products, and in LPGs, liquid petroleum gas. From what we've seen since this war, since COVID...
You're obviously talking about the Russian and Ukraine war, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, what we see about the Russian-Ukrainian war, what we have seen from COVID, and what we've actually seen going back to even 2008 financial crisis, tells us that we are moving towards a very, very uncertain time. Now, with gas, let's start with what I know, which then will lead on to finance, which then can lead on to politics. In the gas industry, we see that now in Nord Stream 2 has been destroyed, has been bombarded. Russians are reducing their amount of gas into Europe. When everybody is saying here, in order to show support for the Ukrainians, that we should disregard Russian gas, that's a thing we definitely should not do. There is power to being a supplier, and Russia is the top exporter of natural gas, along with agricultural products and along with oil. What we see is that throughout Europe, going further and further towards the west, towards the border of Russia, countries are more reliant on Russian gas. For example, in Latvia, 90% of the power that comes into generating for heating, for just average lives of residents, and for factories, 90% of it is Russian gas. We see that countries that refuse to pay in rubles, like Bulgaria, have been cut off completely from Russian gas supply, and they are facing immense shortages, and they are taking extreme actions to try to supply themselves for the coming winter. But this, even though in the UK we have a slightly different situation, we produce a lot of our own natural gas. However, just because there is a complete deficit of natural gas in Europe, it has led to our prices rising to over 215%. So in our case, it's got nothing to do with Russia, but yet we see factories are not able to sustain themselves. We see even in Eastern Europe, this trend has started. In Slovakia, the biggest steel manufacturing company, which supplies 1/10 of the Slovakian population, has had to shut down because it cannot make ends meet with such high gas prices. We see that in Bulgaria, there has become a big shortage of heating in places where. I beg your pardon. Going further west, we see German energy industry collapsing. Even little industries, they cannot continue. They're already very much struggling, and they're demanding subsidies from their governments.
And that obviously is going to lead into major instability and a huge financial crisis in the West generally, right? Extremely.
From what we record, have enough energy to sustain ourselves at least for this winter, and that's assuming that we have a normal winter. As some who might remember a few years ago when we had the beast from the east, who's to know that if we have a winter like that now, will we be able to sustain ourselves for even the next spring or summer? But if this war continues, which I fear that it will, we will not have enough to sustain ourselves for the following winter, and businesses will go out of business.
And obviously, major changes and major instability. That could lead into the collapse of Europe and the West. If this continues, will have a major impact on the whole entire world, especially in North Africa and the Middle East and the Gulf area and Saudi Arabia and all these countries. Is that correct or not?
Exactly. For example, if we're going to transition how energy leads into finance, these industrial complexes that require gas to manufacture products. If they are not able to pay their energy bills, they will shut down. This will lead to an inevitable increase in unemployment and also a reduction in certain products and materials which we require for our day-to-day lives. Now it means that if you are an owner of a factory, what do? You sell. But then if everyone's selling, it means the prices of those commodities get less and less. The prices of that infrastructure gets less and less. And as we know, in finance, a currency is based on two things. One, it is based on faith of the consumer. Two, it is based on the value of that commodity and asset. Meaning if those assets become cheaper, the currency will inevitably become cheaper. We already see inflation now. Take, for example, America, in which 40% of the American dollar, which is already in circulation now, was printed in 2021. Our currencies, it means globally, are becoming less and less valuable. It means that, and as your value gets less as the value of that currency gets less and less, it means that people have no choice but to increase the prices of certain assets in order to make ends meet. This means, take it into a real life situation. Before, in my parents' generation, where it took 20 years to pay off a mortgage, now you can imagine it will take 45, even 50 years to pay off a mortgage. Anybody who owns a semi-detached house in London now is, in fact, a millionaire. And it means that the people who own the assets, the only people who can own the assets, are the extremely wealthy. This will lead to a big divide in society. The middle class is dying out already, and it's going to diminish and diminish until you have the very rich and the very poor, in which the very poor will never be able to come out of that rut of poverty, and yet the rich will continue to get richer because they have all the assets.
And that obviously leads into major disasters in England, UK, and the West in general. Is that correct?
Yes, it means that even even for Western worlds. It was even for Western worlds in which we have tried to build an infrastructure of stability and equality for all, means that inevitably it will collapse. For example, take Japan. We see that in Japan, with their major inflation rates, the only people who have been able to, the only people that have been able to afford certain assets, certain great and very valuable assets, land, big properties, have all been within the top 1% of the population, as well as that half of that 1% being from the government. The government is buying up assets just as to make sure that the working class is not able to get out of this rut, and you won't be able to escape it.
So in 1 minute, John, because I have to wrap this up, tell me, what do you expect in the future if the situation in Russia and Ukraine continues, and perhaps another situation may occur with China and Taiwan, and maybe anything else we don't know. So tell me, what do you expect in 1 minute?
In short, I expect there to be, one, a shortage in energy. There will be rationing. Those of us that have heard in World War II where people rationed food in order to sustain ourselves, it shall be the same with energy. And energy leads to various industries. If you control the energy, you control the power. For example, all these fertilizer companies, which help fertilize the fields in order to produce the food for us to eat off the shelves of Tesco and Asda, they need gas. If the gas goes, the fertilizer goes, the production in agricultural products goes down. And there will be rationing. There will be rationing, and it will mean that it will be harder and harder to have quality of life which we have had for the past 2 generations.
Thank you very much, John. I really appreciate your insights, and it was very helpful given your expertise on the energy and the general situation in the world right now. Thank you, John.